The photos made it look like a perfect day. The dress was white, the flowers were real, the cake had 3 tiers, and everyone smiled, including me, especially me. But when I opened the album this morning, 3 weeks after the wedding, I saw it for what it really was. A stage where I played a supporting role in my own life. There was one shot in particular that stuck with me. I was cutting the cake with Corliss, and just behind us, there was Adelpha, smiling bigger than me, positioned perfectly in frame. Every photo, every angle, there she was, always in focus. I noticed that in half the shots I wasn't even looking at the camera. I looked tired, not sleepy tired, but soul tired. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, I murmured, running my finger along the glossy page. This one lies at least 900 of them. I closed the album for a moment, letting the silence settle. From the living room window, I could hear neighborhood kids playing. Laughter carried on the breeze, carefree, unburdened. I used to wonder what that felt like. How did I let it get this far? 10 years earlier, at 22, I had been accepted into the Boston Institute of Architecture. It was the kind of letter you frame. I didn't even open it. I knew what it was before I saw the seal, and I knew I wasn't going. That same morning, Adelpha showed up with her third baby and a suitcase. "I can't do it anymore," she said, eyes puffy, lips dry. He left, again. She handed me the baby like it was groceries and collapsed on my couch. The child was barely 6 months old. And just like that, my dreams got filed under someday. That letter still sits in the bottom drawer of my desk, sealed, unread. I buried it under unpaid utility bills, daycare receipts, and sticky notes that say things like, "Pick up Jackson at 3, or Chloe's meds." Sometimes you bury your dreams to keep someone else alive. No one questioned it. No one said, "Why not take a break and go anyway?" They just looked at me and nodded. "Bellamy can handle it," and I did. I handled 6 lunchboxes, 3 school bus routes, annual dentist appointments, and midnight ER visits. I handled the way Lucy needed her hair braided a certain way or she'd melt down before school. I handled how the twins hated sleeping apart, even though they were 10. I handled Kyle's broken arm, Chloe's anxiety, and James's rebellion. I handled it all. One time at the grocery store, Max called me Mommy by accident. Adelpha whipped around, eyes like daggers. "She's not your mom, I am," she snapped loud enough that 3 aisles heard it. I laughed it off. The cashier gave me a sympathetic look. I felt nothing, not then. You learn to dull the pain when it becomes routine. Being their everything meant being no one. Adelpha had 3 kids by 3 different men, none of whom paid a dime in child support. "They're deadbeats," she'd say, like she wasn't part of the pattern. Each time one disappeared, the baby would end up in my arms. When someone asked her about it once, she said, "Bellamy just loves kids." And I wanted to scream, "No, Bellamy loves responsibility. Bellamy hates chaos. Bellamy cleans up your messes because no one else will. Blood makes you related. Responsibility makes you family." And yet, I was the childless sister, the one who never had her own. I gave up a decade of building someone else's family, and somehow I was still seen as the one with time on her hands. I remember a school parent night. Chloe was getting an award. I showed up early, sat in the middle row, wore slacks and a blouse because I thought it mattered. Adelpha showed up 15 minutes late in a tight dress and stilettos. When the teacher thanked Chloe's amazing mom, she beamed and nodded. I smiled too. My hands were shaking in my lap. Pride or dignity? I'm still not sure which one I swallowed that night. By the time Corliss proposed, I wasn't even excited. I was tired. But I said yes because he was the first person who ever asked how I was doing without needing something in return. When I told Adelpha, her mouth twisted into that grin that wasn't a smile. "Wow," she said, her tone syrupy. "Someone finally locked it down, huh?" Everyone laughed. At me. Not with me. And in that moment, I knew. The day wasn't going to be mine. Not really. It was already hers. Corliss deserved better. I wanted to give him a wedding, not a war zone, but the moment Adelpha offered to help with the planning, I lost control of everything. Suddenly, her kids were in the bridal party. Suddenly, the theme changed. Suddenly, her name was on the RSVP email. People started calling her instead of me. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on my couch, drinking wine from my engagement mug. I posted about the registry, she said, not even looking up. Used your login since I couldn't remember mine. I said nothing. My silence had become the cost of peace. Now sitting with this photo album, I flipped to the shot where she held my bouquet after the ceremony. She wasn't the maid of honor. She wasn't even supposed to stand that close. But there she was, smiling like it was her coronation. How do you become a guest at your own wedding? I whispered. And the maid of honor becomes the queen. I closed the album and stood. The afternoon light had shifted, painting the room in gold and shadow. My eyes landed on the bottom shelf of the bookcase, on a plain white envelope with the Boston Institute of Architecture seal. That letter had stayed sealed for 10 years, but that night, I decided to finally open it. The morning of the rehearsal began earlier than I'd planned. I hadn't slept well, my mind chasing every detail of the wedding checklist, place cards, vows, florist confirmation. My planner lay open on the kitchen table, its pages crowded with neat handwriting, color-coded tabs, and circled tasks. This was supposed to be the calm before the celebration, the final stretch. I whispered to myself, just one more day. One more day, and I get to be someone new. I made coffee, but forgot to drink it. The mug went cold beside me as I reviewed vendor emails and checked off things I'd already checked 3 times. The venue wasn't extravagant, a modest community center on the edge of town, brick building, small garden out front, but it mattered to me. It was where I had hosted bake sales, voted in every election, and once watched my niece's school play. It was familiar and mine, or at least I wanted it to feel that way. Corliss texted around 8:13. You've done all the hard work. Today's about putting on the polish. You've got this. I smiled. I wanted to believe him, but the closer it got, the tighter my stomach knotted. I couldn't shake the thought something was going to go off script, something always did. And then Adelpha arrived. Late, predictably. Her car screeched into the parking lot like it was being chased. 7 kids spilled out in different directions, none of them dressed for a rehearsal. One had a juice pouch, another was missing a shoe. The youngest had her hair matted into a nest of knots. Adelpha swung out of the driver's seat like she was descending a stage. Sunglasses, oversized handbag, a fake smile already in place. Sorry, she called, waving dramatically. You know how mornings are with this crew. I didn't respond. I was too busy intercepting Jackson before he tackled a table of wedding favors and asking Chloe to please keep Lucy from digging into the cupcakes that weren't meant to be eaten yet. I knelt to fix one of the folding chairs that had collapsed when Max jumped on it like a trampoline. When I asked Adelpha to help corral her kids, she rolled her eyes. Relax, Bellamy. They're just kids. Don't micromanage everything. One of the bridesmaids, Marcia, leaned in and whispered, Isn't she the sister? Why is she treating this like it's her show? My ears burned. I turned away, pretending I hadn't heard. But the truth rang louder than the comment. This wasn't my show. Not anymore. The rehearsal officially started, or tried to. The wedding planner attempted to get everyone in place, but Adelpha kept breaking formation to check her phone, reapply lipstick, and adjust her kids' outfits like they were on a runway. She argued with the officiant about the entrance order. It just doesn't make sense for the kids to go last, she said, placing her hand on her hip. They're the cutest part. Halfway through the aisle walk, one of the twins threw a tantrum over not holding the bouquet. Instead of helping, Adelpha laughed and said, Better get used to it, folks. Tomorrow's going to be wilder than this. The planner nervously chuckled and looked at me. I nodded, tight-lipped, as if to say, Yes, this is fine, even though it wasn't. I stood there, surrounded by people I'd invited, in a building I had paid to decorate, watching my sister orchestrate attention like it was oxygen. No one was looking at me. No one was listening to me. Again, I wasn't the bride. I was the babysitter. Adelpha insisted on running the children through their entrance twice more, complete with pairings and flower toss choreography. Everyone cooed and clapped. One guest even quipped, You sure this isn't a baby dedication? I laughed, politely. Inside, my lungs were bricks. We hadn't even rehearsed the vows yet. That night, I found myself alone in the church parking lot long after everyone had left. The sun was setting, painting the sky in the kind of pink that usually softened me, but not this time. I sat behind the wheel, door ajar, key unturned. The only sound was the occasional tap of a leaf against the windshield. I played back the day in fragments, Corliss's missed text I hadn't answered, my bouquet knocked over, Lucy with frosting on her dress. The planner telling me, "She's got a strong personality, huh?" I didn't want to cry, but my throat felt hot. I grabbed my phone and texted Corliss. "Please tell me tomorrow won't be like this." He called within seconds. "It won't be," he said without hesitation. "Because tomorrow, you won't let them hijack it. Promise me." That word, hijack, stuck. I'd spent years letting her steer, giving her space, ceding my time, my spotlight, my self-respect. Maybe I thought it was kindness. Maybe I was just afraid of what would happen if I stopped being agreeable. Back home, I opened a journal I hadn't touched in months and scribbled furiously. If I had to shrink to make her shine, how small will I need to get for tomorrow? I didn't know the answer, but I was done shrinking. It reminded me of another day. My college graduation dinner. I'd booked a table at a small Italian place I loved. My parents came, my then-boyfriend Evan, a few friends. It was supposed to be a celebration, my first real win. Adelpha showed up 40 minutes late in tears, said her boyfriend had broken up with her. All night, people passed her tissues and offered advice. My diploma sat in my purse, untouched. Even then, she made it about her. I thought that was a one-time thing. I thought I was being compassionate. But patterns don't lie. They repeat until you interrupt them. They say you teach people how to treat you. What the hell have I taught mine? I turned to the laptop, opened my digital seating chart, and hovered over her name. I clicked and dragged her from table 1, directly in front of the couple's table, to table 5 near the far corner. The kids' side, we used to call it at Thanksgiving. I didn't do it out of vengeance. I did it to survive. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up with a familiar heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was something quieter, heavier. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that creeps in when you've carried too much for too long. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, already lighting up with messages. Most weren't for me. Adelpha's kids looked adorable yesterday. Tell Adelpha her speech had me laughing all night. Your sister is a riot, truly the star of the evening. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete button. I didn't answer a single one. The night came back in flashes, laughter louder for her jokes than it had been for my vows, compliments meant for her, eyes that followed her across the room like she was the bride. I remember clenching my fork so hard it left an imprint in my palm. I remember the clink of champagne glasses after someone toasted the real MVP of the family. Adelpha, raising 7 kids all by herself. No mention of me, not even a glance. I forced a smile then, I even nodded, but inside, I unraveled one thread at a time. And then she said it. Bellamy helped, of course, but it's not the same as being the mom. A slow, surgical cut, polite enough to go unnoticed by others, but precise enough to gut me. 10 years of scraped knees, forgotten science fairs, late-night fevers, therapy appointments, homework marathons, disappeared in one sentence. She got the applause, I got the silence. At one point, I caught my own reflection in the champagne glass, distorted and warped by the liquid. That was me, twisted around everyone else's needs, until I couldn't even recognize the shape I used to be. That toast wasn't just painful, it was familiar. 3 years ago, there was a teacher appreciation banquet at the elementary school. Adelpha had been too tired to attend, so I went in her place. I dressed up, showed up early, sat through 2 hours of performances and speeches. When they called her name, I stood in the back and clapped quietly. The school handed me a generic thank you ribbon. Adelpha, who wasn't even in the building, received a framed certificate mailed to the house. I knew. I'd picked it up for her on the way home. It hung on her living room wall like a trophy. The kids saw it. I never corrected them when they assumed it meant she was the one who showed up. Being invisible takes practice. I'd mastered it. After the rehearsal, the pattern repeated itself before I even stepped out of bed. I opened my inbox to find an email from Chloe's school counselor. It had been intended for Adelpha, but came to me because I was still listed as the emergency contact. The subject line read, "Thank you for raising such a bright young woman." The body of the message praised Mrs. Adelpha for her commitment, her parental presence, her sacrifice. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't forward it. I didn't reply. I just sat there, staring at the words, letting them slice through me. There's something uniquely cruel about watching credit go to the person who let the job fall on you in the first place. I whispered, "I raised her. I taught her." But only one woman gets the applause. When Corliss came over later that afternoon, I showed him the email. I didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward him and waited. He read it once, then again. He didn't speak right away, which told me everything. After a long pause, he said, "Do you want me to say something at the wedding? I can fix this." I shook my head. "If I need someone else to validate me, I've already lost." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he placed his hand on mine and nodded. That was enough. That night, I printed the email and tucked it into a folder labeled Proof. Not for anyone else, just for me. A place where I could store the evidence of what I'd carried, in case I ever started to forget why I stopped saying yes. Later, I walked to the small park near my apartment, wrapped in a scarf and still wearing the same shoes from the night before. The sky was a flat gray, the air cool, not cold. I sat on the same bench where I used to bring Lucy to eat her after-school snacks. It had graffiti now. Someone had scrawled, "Know your worth." I whispered, "Maybe I finally do." Looking back, it was always the same script. My graduation party? She cried about her boyfriend. My job offer? She staged a crisis. When I signed the lease for my first apartment, she called, frantic, needing me to pick up the kids because she couldn't breathe. Every joy of mine had been a commercial break in the broadcast of her chaos. Not anymore. I pulled out the wedding speech I'd printed 3 weeks earlier. It was polite, safe, filled with gratitude and soft metaphors. I read it once more. Then I took out a pen. I crossed out the second paragraph entirely. "If this is going to be my day," I wrote at the bottom of the page, "I'm going to start acting like I deserve it." The morning before the wedding, I came home with a list in my hand and a plan in my mind. I had every intention of spending the next few hours in quiet preparation, checking seating charts, calling vendors, maybe sipping tea in silence before everything turned public and loud. What I found instead was frosting on my throw pillows, sticky fingerprints on the fridge handle, and a pile of crumpled paper plates scattered like forgotten confetti across my living room. At first, I stood in the doorway, frozen. It was like walking into a party I never knew I was hosting. Bright balloons still hovered near the ceiling, some drifting lazily above the couch. My rug was stained pink, and the faint smell of boxed cake mix clung to the air. On the coffee table, someone had left a half-eaten cupcake directly on my wedding binder, on the page with the final budget numbers. My heart sank. I picked up my phone. The first thing that popped up on social media was a picture of Adelpha holding one of her kids, surrounded by smiling cousins and paper streamers. The caption read, "Thanks to my amazing sister Bellamy for letting us celebrate here today. You're the best. I hadn't given permission. I hadn't even known." "There's a difference between giving and being taken from," I muttered, brushing dried frosting from the binder. I texted Adelpha, careful not to sound aggressive. "Hey, next time can you give me a heads up before using my place for a party?" Her reply came fast. "Don't be so uptight. It's family." Not long after, I saw her follow-up post. "Some people act like a party is the end of the world. SMH. I read through the comments, friends and relatives chiming in with laughing emojis and backhanded quips. She's always been sensitive. "Let the kids have fun, it's not that serious." No one had even asked if I was okay with it. I closed the app and opened my planner. On tomorrow's page, under the word vows, I wrote in ink, "Boundaries aren't rude. Entitlement is." For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just angry, I was awake. Later that afternoon, I drove to the bank to settle the last few vendor payments. The florist, the caterer, the live music deposit. Everything was set to go. I was confident, composed, until the teller frowned. "You withdrew this already," she said, motioning to the amount I'd written on the check. My stomach dropped. "I haven't been here in over a week." She double-checked the date. 2 days ago. And then I remembered. Adelpha had borrowed my checkbook that night to order pizza for the kids while I was doing last-minute DIY centerpieces. I called her the moment I stepped outside. She answered on the second ring, sounding amused. "Hey, Bridezilla. You took money from my wedding account?" There was a pause, just long enough to confirm everything I feared. "Oh, that. I needed to get my nails done." "You want me looking a mess at your wedding?" I blinked. "You took $700. It's not like it's gone forever. Just tell the florist you'll pay after the honeymoon." "Chill out. You're overreacting." "Do you even hear yourself?" "I'm doing my best, Bellamy. You think raising 7 kids doesn't come with emergencies?" "This wasn't an emergency. This was theft." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You act like I emptied your account." I hung up. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. Not to her. Not to anyone who'd spent years brushing off her behavior as just Adelpha being Adelpha. That night, I didn't cry. I sat at my desk and made a list. Not of groceries or wedding details, but of every time Adelpha had crossed a line. Every borrowed dress never returned. Every appointment she made me cancel. Every time she turned my plans into an afterthought. I filled 3 pages before I even realized what I was doing. "When someone shows you who they are," I whispered, "believe them." The words weren't mine, Maya Angelou's, but they fit. I changed the password to my banking app. I emailed the florist and asked them to resend the invoice, to Corliss's name this time. I called the venue and asked them to cancel the joint order for flowers that Adelpha had added to match the kids' outfits. "No more access," I told the woman on the phone. "Bellamy only." At dinner, Corliss noticed my silence. He set his fork down and looked across the table. "You okay?" I nodded, then shook my head. "No, but I will be." He waited, so I told him. Everything. The birthday party, the frosting on the binder, the missing money, the smug response. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to fix it. When I finished, he said, "You're not crazy, and you're not alone in this." He reached for my hand. "I can cover the vendors if that helps. We'll figure this out." I squeezed his fingers, but shook my head. "I need to do this myself. I need to see it through." Corliss nodded again. He didn't argue. That's what made him different. He didn't need to be a hero. He just stayed. Later that night, I opened my wedding binder. The budget sheet was stained from the cupcake. For a second, I considered wiping it clean. Instead, I tore the page out. I flipped to the back and rewrote the entire list by hand. At the top, I added a new section, non-negotiables. And beneath that, the first line read, "No open access, Bellamy only." I exhaled. It wasn't just a list. It was a reclaiming. I didn't feel like the victim anymore. I felt like someone rebuilding her house after a fire, stone by stone, but this time with steel in the foundation. Before bed, I opened my laptop and drafted a quick email to the wedding planner. Subject: Update. New instructions. Only I can authorize changes. All expenses must be pre-approved. I didn't copy Adelpha, and I didn't feel guilty. The boutique was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that should have calmed me, but didn't. My fitting was scheduled for 10, and I'd arrived early, clutching my coffee like a lifeline. I wanted to savor this. My last private moment before the ceremony swallowed everything whole. It was supposed to be about me. For once, just me. My mother arrived 15 minutes late, all perfume and controlled smiles. She greeted the seamstress, complimented the decor, and didn't look at me until I was already zipped into the dress. When she finally turned, her smile faltered. "That white's a bit much, don't you think?" she said, as if commenting on weather. "Ivory would have been softer, more mature, less obvious." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like a paper cut, small, sharp, and made worse by how casually she said them. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just looked at myself in the mirror and thought, Why is my purity always being measured against someone else's mistakes? The ride home was even quieter. I sat in the back seat, pretending to scroll through my phone, until her voice broke the silence. Yes, she looked lovely, she said to whoever was on the other end. We just need to keep her calm until tomorrow. She'll get over it, she always does. I didn't need to ask who she was talking to. It was always Adelpha, always coordinating, always orchestrating, always managing the woman who was supposedly the bride. I looked out the window and remembered prom. Senior year, I wore a pale blue dress. Adelpha showed up half an hour late, in a nearly identical one. Just thought it'd be fun, she'd said, laughing. That night, our mom called her brave for coming after a breakup. I was background again, pretty, but never spotlighted. Every milestone came with an emotional invoice. By the time the rehearsal dinner started that evening, I had already made peace with the fact that it wasn't going to feel like mine. I just wanted to get through it, be polite, keep control. For the first hour, it went okay. People smiled, toasted, ate too much pasta. I kept my dress clean and my laughter light. Then Uncle Dean handed me a manila envelope. It's just a formality, he said. Family thing. Adelpha said it'd be best. I opened it. Inside was a prenuptial agreement, not from Corliss, from my family. A financial protection clause, it said, typed neatly at the top. Suggested by Adelpha. Signed already by my mother. I blinked. Read it again. What is this? I asked. Adelpha stood nearby, swirling her wine. Better safe than sorry. We can't afford another family failure. She didn't even flinch when she said it. Someone laughed. One of my cousins, I think. I couldn't breathe. The wedding planner tried to joke. Nothing like a little light reading before the big day, right? I stood. I walked out. Outside, the air hit me like water. I was shaking, not with sadness, but rage, white-hot, bone-deep fury. Corliss found me leaning against a lamppost, wiping mascara off my cheek with the back of my hand. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there. Then, gently, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." I looked up. "Did you know?" "No," he said firmly. "And I'm not marrying them. I'm marrying you." That was the moment I remembered who I was. I didn't cancel the wedding, but I took it back. That night, I texted the planner. Told her to cut Adelpha's speech. I replaced my maid of honor with Elise, my college roommate who had stayed up with me through every all-nighter, never asking for credit. I emailed the seamstress and asked her to stitch my name into the inside of the dress. Small, silent, but mine. I remembered something I'd read in a book years ago. Brené Brown said, "Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others." That became my anchor. I didn't shout. I didn't fight fire with fire. I fought with clarity. The morning of the wedding, I stepped down the stairs in the white dress, full white. My mother stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, her lips pressed into a line, but she didn't say a word. Adelpha walked in, froze for a second, then smirked. "Bold choice," she said. I smiled, slow and sure. "Brides wear white, and I'm the bride." The room went quiet. It wasn't about fabric, it was about identity. I hadn't taken anything from her. I was finally just standing in what had always been mine. As I stepped into the limo later that morning, the wedding planner leaned in. "There's a small change to the order of events," she said carefully. Adelpha insisted. I didn't flinch this time. I held my bouquet a little tighter. Whatever it was, I was ready. Or so I thought. The morning of the ceremony started with a kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It was too still, like the air before a summer storm. I was up before dawn, not because of nerves, but because of clarity. I was going to reclaim this day, no matter how much noise they tried to wrap it in. In the dressing room, I sat alone with a handheld mirror, checking my eyeliner. The white dress hung behind me like a flag on a hill I wasn't backing down from. Every smile that morning felt strained. Too many people said, "You must be so happy," with the kind of rehearsed tone usually reserved for strangers at funerals. Adelpha showed up 30 minutes late, dragging in her kids like it was a chaotic Monday morning school drop-off. Their shoes untied, juice bottles dripping onto the marble floor, and one of the twins had marker on his forehead. She insisted on moving her speech up, the planner whispered to me when we crossed paths in the hallway. I felt my jaw tighten, but I nodded. Let them speak first, I thought. I'll finish last. The ceremony itself should have felt surreal. Corliss's eyes never left me as we said our vows, and for that moment it was just the two of us. The words were ours. They weren't interrupted, hijacked, or diluted. But as soon as the officiant stepped back and signaled the microphone for family speeches, reality stormed the gates. Adelpha didn't wait for the MC. She walked right up, all tears and mascara and theatrical sighs. She started by thanking me. By name. My sister Bellamy, who helped me raise my babies when I couldn't stand on my own. Applause broke out. Some people even sniffled. But the real heroes, she continued, voice trembling like a soap opera actress, are the children. The reason I kept going. The reason I became the woman I am today. The speech wasn't about me. It wasn't about Corliss. It wasn't even about love. It was a personal branding pitch in front of 100 guests who didn't know the backstory. I stood frozen at the front, a prop on the stage, watching her craft the version of herself she wanted them to see. A devoted single mother, a survivor, a sister who had endured. I didn't flinch, but inside, I went cold. After the ceremony, while guests filtered into the reception hall and the tables were being rearranged for the evening, I noticed something strange. The wedding card box had been moved, not dramatically, but enough that the ribbon sealing the lid was slightly off, like someone had opened and closed it in a hurry. I walked toward it, but didn't open it. Something in me hesitated. That's when my cousin Nora, who had always been quiet at family functions, pulled me aside. I think you should see this, she said, lowering her phone screen for me. It was a video. Shaky but clear. Adelpha. Opening the box, reaching in. Pulling out a bundle of white envelopes and slipping them into her purse while the wedding party was taking photos on the lawn. The clip ended as quickly as it had begun. My mouth went dry. I found her near the dessert table, chatting like nothing happened. You went into the gift box? I asked, voice low but firm. She blinked, innocent as ever. What are you talking about? I showed her the video. She barely glanced at it. Oh, that. I was just separating family cards. Thought it'd be easier later. It's not like I was stealing. You took envelopes out of a sealed box. They're mostly from people I invited. Why are you being weird about this? I stepped back, stunned. Put them back. She laughed, loud enough for the couple standing nearby to turn. You're being dramatic. It's your wedding. Lighten up. I turned and walked directly to my mother, who was chatting with Aunt Marlene like nothing was wrong. I showed her the video. Instead of gasping or reacting with horror, she said, "Why would you record your own sister? That's tacky." I didn't record it. Nora did. Well, it's your wedding. Be gracious. She's probably overwhelmed. So my reality is an inconvenience to everyone's comfort? She sighed. Do you want this day to be about bitterness, Bellamy? I stared at her, realization crashing into my chest. I had spent a lifetime trying to keep the peace in a war I hadn't started. Bitterness wasn't the problem. Silence was. Years earlier, when Lucy had been hospitalized for an asthma attack, I stayed up through the night feeding her liquids, holding her upright so she could breathe easier, texting doctors and rescheduling school pickups for the others. The next morning, Adelpha arrived with Starbucks and fresh mascara. She stayed 5 minutes, posed for a photo beside the hospital bed, and left. That picture got shared in the family group chat. Our warrior mom. I never corrected anyone. That memory came back now, clear as glass. I left the reception room without another word, found the venue manager, requested security footage. Not just from the gift table, but from the hallway, the coat check, the entrance. She nodded. It's all backed up automatically. I smiled. Good. Can you send me access to download it? I forwarded the guest video from Nora, plus the camera clip, to a folder on my laptop I had named Record of Pattern. I wasn't being petty. I was being prepared, because this wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. You can love people and still not let them walk all over you. That's the part no one ever teaches you. Back at the reception, the DJ was warming up. A few people were dancing. Adelpha was still mingling like she owned the room. I pulled the planner aside. Take Adelpha off the speech list for tonight. She hesitated. You sure? I looked her straight in the eye. I've never been more sure of anything. The clinking of silverware and the murmurs of full-bellied guests filled the room as Corliss and I took our seats at the head table. It was finally done. The ceremony, the photos, the interruptions. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, feeling the tension slowly begin to melt from my shoulders. Corliss smiled at me, and for 1 second, just one, I allowed myself to believe the worst was behind us. I was wrong. The MC stood and tapped the microphone, about to begin introducing the speeches we'd arranged when Adelpha cut in, walking straight toward the mic like it was made for her. She wasn't on the list. She didn't need to be. She never asked for permission, only for forgiveness later, if that. Before we get started, she began, voice soft, teary-eyed, hand pressed dramatically to her chest. I just want to take a moment to say something from the heart. Corliss grabbed my hand under the table. I didn't squeeze back. This day isn't just about love, she continued, scanning the crowd. It's about family, and I'm thrilled to share that our family is growing. Baby number 9 is on the way. Gasps rippled through the room like a rogue wave crashing into a calm shore. And then applause, laughter, whistles. A moment ago, people were clapping for me. Now they were clapping for her. I sat there, smiling like someone had glued it on my face. Champagne in hand, I raised my glass because what else was I supposed to do? Scream, cry, leave? Inside I was screaming. On my day, on my dime? A guest leaned in from the next table, chuckling under their breath. She really made this about her, huh? I gave a polite laugh, then excused myself to the restroom. I didn't need the bathroom. I needed a soundproof room where I could fall apart quietly. The stalls were empty. I locked one, sat on the closed toilet lid, and stared at the floor. She didn't just steal attention, she colonized it. Made it hers. My wedding had turned into her announcement party. Her photo op, her moment. When I stepped back out, I didn't return to the table. I found her near the dessert display, holding court like she was the one in white. Why? I asked. Calm, low. She turned, blinking. Why what? Why make that announcement tonight? A smirk tugged at her lips. Because I knew you wouldn't share the spotlight willingly. You do realize this wasn't your event to hijack. Oh, please, Bellamy. You think this day is about your dress and your vows? It's about family. You wouldn't understand. My breath caught. She leaned in, voice hushed but sharp. You've never had kids. You don't know what real sacrifice is. You're not a mother. I stared at her, stunned. I raised your kids, I whispered. You babysat them, she corrected with a shrug. There's a difference. The pain was so sharp I thought I'd vomit. I turned on my heel and walked straight to my mother. She was seated with a glass of red wine, chatting like nothing had happened. I need to talk to you, I said. She followed me outside the ballroom, to a quiet corner near the coat check. She just humiliated me again, I began, voice trembling. And you're going to say nothing? She didn't mean it like that, my mom said, sighing. It's her way of coping. She's always the one you defend. She's always been more fragile than you. I blinked. So because I'm stable, I don't get support? You don't need it, she said softly. And that was it. The line that severed something inside me. All my life, I'd been the strong one, the capable one, the responsible one, and they'd used it as an excuse to neglect me. Later, as Corliss and I sat side by side in a small room off the reception hall, I recounted the confrontation. He didn't interrupt, just waited. What do you want to do next? He asked finally. I was taken aback. No one had ever asked me that. The question felt foreign, dangerous. I want to stop pretending, I said. I want to stop letting her write my story. He nodded. Then let's turn the page. While guests danced and took selfies, I stepped outside for air. The night was cool, and stars dotted the sky above like pinholes in velvet. I looked around and saw people smiling. At her, at themselves. No one knew what was really happening, and that was the problem. They saw curated versions of us, the polished photos, the staged hugs. They didn't see the manipulations, the gaslighting, the theft of narrative, but I did, and I wasn't going to protect the image anymore. That night, after we returned to the hotel suite, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I started writing. Not a speech, not a rant, a record, not revenge, but self-preservation. Receipts, dates, photos, transcripts. I added the confrontation, the gift box video, the conversation with Mom. Everything. And then I labeled the folder on my desktop. Record. It wasn't just for me anymore. It was for the version of me that had been erased, rewritten, rebranded. It was for the woman who wasn't going to vanish quietly. 1 week after the wedding, I was invited to a family dinner at my mother's house. The subject line of the text read, "Let's clear the air." The message was brief, polite. There was no apology, no ownership. Just a suggestion that I show up and sit at the table like nothing had happened. I knew it wasn't a peace offering. It was a performance. The cast was chosen, the lines rehearsed, and I was expected to play the forgiving daughter, again. Corliss offered to come, but I asked him not to. I didn't want him witnessing another scene written by someone else. Adelpha greeted me at the door, smile too wide, voice too smooth. "Hey, sis, glad you made it." She wore light pink, the shade she always chose when she wanted to appear soft, harmless. It didn't fool me. I stepped inside. The dining table was already set, candles lit, too formal for what was supposed to be an impromptu family conversation. They weren't looking for resolution, I thought. They were staging a redemption arc I never agreed to be in. We sat. Chatter about traffic, work, and casserole filled the silence. I waited, and when the noise dipped low enough, I spoke. "I'd like to say something," I began, my tone steady, clear, every head turned. "I know we're all here because of what happened, at the wedding, before, after. So I want to lay it out." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I told them about the video of Adelpha taking the cards from the gift box, about the speech she gave that wasn't hers to give, about the years of erasure, the emotional labor, the manipulation masked as family love. "I'm not here to fight," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "I'm here to reclaim my voice and my dignity." Adelpha dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "I didn't know I hurt you that badly," she said, sniffling. "You should have said something sooner." I stared at her. "You always knew." "You just didn't care until you were called out." The table sat in stunned silence. And then my cousin Jenna laughed. "Oh, come on, Bellamy. You act like she punched you in the face. It's just family drama." A few others chuckled nervously. I stood up. Not to storm out, but to stop shrinking. "If this is drama to you, then I don't belong here." I picked up my purse and turned toward the hallway. My mother stood, blocking my path. "Don't leave angry," she said, her voice low. "Forgiveness is how we heal. Don't throw away your family over a few missteps." I didn't flinch. "You're not asking me to forgive," I replied. "You're asking me to forget. There's a difference." She looked at me like I'd just betrayed her. "You're stronger, Bellamy. Adelpha's had it harder. She's raised kids, struggled alone." "And I raised her kids," I cut in. "Alone. You never complained before." "Because I didn't think I was allowed." Her eyes welled up. "You've always been the strong one. And you keep rewarding chaos and punishing composure," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. No one moved. For a moment, I was back in our old kitchen. I was 8. Adelpha had stolen money from Mom's purse, and I had seen it. I told. I expected to be thanked. Instead, I heard, "Stop tattling. You're just jealous." That was the first time I learned silence was safer. That truth cost you favor. And now, here I was again. An adult, finally speaking, still being told to hush for the comfort of others. I wouldn't do it again. I turned back toward the table. You've all benefited from me being quiet, from me being easy. That ends tonight. I pulled a small USB from my purse and placed it on the table. That's everything. The videos, the screenshots, the receipts. If any of you want the truth, it's there. But you'll have to open it yourselves. I stepped back. I am no longer the vault for this family's secrets. I am not your scapegoat, your background prop, or your emotional landfill. I took my purse, and I left. Not in rage, not in tears, in power. Outside, the night air was cooler than I expected. It wrapped around me like freedom. My phone buzzed. A text from Corliss. Ready when you are. And I was, ready to start over, this time without erasing myself. The invitation came via group text. It was simple. Chloe's graduation ceremony, Friday night, 6 p.m. at the high school auditorium. I stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering. My name wasn't mentioned. Neither was my role. I'd raised her since she was 2. There was no seat saved for me. No thank you in the body of the text. Just a reminder that the event was happening, and I could attend if I wanted to, like any other distant relative, so I went. I arrived early, sat in the back. From where I sat, I could see Adelpha seated in the front row, surrounded by family, camera poised, her posture perfect, hair curled, her signature, "I'm so proud" smile etched across her face, the kind of smile that knew exactly when to appear. She waved to the principal like they were old friends. She laughed too loudly when someone mentioned Chloe's GPA. When Chloe's name was finally called, she took the stage, bright and glowing. "I want to thank my mom," she said into the mic, "for showing me strength." Applause filled the room. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. But something inside me settled further into the quiet. Invisible doesn't mean unimportant, but today, it felt like it. After the ceremony, I made my way through the crowd of hugging families, overheard congratulations, and clapping hands. I waited until Chloe had finished posing for her 7th photo with Adelpha before I approached her. "Hey," I said. She looked surprised. Her smile faltered. "Oh, hi, Aunt Bellamy." "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it. "Really proud." "Thanks." She shifted her weight, eyes flickering toward her mom, then back to me. I hesitated. "Was there a reason I wasn't listed on the invite?" Her face flushed. "I didn't make the list. Mom said it'd be easier not to complicate things." "Complicate?" She looked down, then around, lowering her voice. "I'm sorry. Mom said not to stir things up today." I frowned. "Stir what up?" Chloe hesitated again. "I overheard her on the phone, a few weeks ago. She said it used to be Corliss." My breath left my body. "Corliss?" I repeated, though I already knew the answer, or feared I did. She nodded, biting her lip. "She was talking about my dad. I think she meant him." I didn't speak. My hands felt numb. My brain tried to trace timelines, to stitch logic over emotion, but it couldn't. That night, I sat on my bed, clutching a heating pad I didn't need, trying to piece it all together. 9 years ago, Corliss and I had broken up briefly. It wasn't dramatic. We'd both been overwhelmed, burned out. We took a few weeks to breathe. I remembered crying on the couch. Adelpha had shown up with wine, sympathy, and a whole night of "it's his loss" speeches. We drank, we talked. She left early the next morning. I never questioned it. In fact, she avoided Corliss for almost a year afterward, said it was too weird being around him. Back then, I thought she was trying to respect boundaries. Now I wasn't so sure. I started retracing every interaction since then, every lingering glance, every passive remark, every moment she mentioned his name, just a little too casually. She didn't just take over my wedding. She might have taken something much deeper, something I didn't even know I'd lost. When Corliss got home, I confronted him. "I need to ask you something," I said, heart racing. "Okay," he said, setting down his bag. Was there ever anything between you and Adelpha?" His brows furrowed. "What? No. Not even during the time we broke up?" He shook his head immediately. I left town, remember? I went to stay with my brother in Tacoma. I nodded, but doubt lingered. It wasn't just about whether it had happened. It was about why she was using it now. Why now? I could feel the manipulation wrapping around me like fog, clouding my memories, distorting facts. I didn't know what was real anymore, so I stopped trying to sort emotions and started gathering proof. I dug into old messages, chat logs, group texts from years ago. I found small things, comments from friends, screenshots of her joking, "We almost shared a man once," sent to others, never to me. Pieces I had ignored then that felt like nothing. But now they painted a fuller picture. Adelpha didn't just sabotage, she curated. Every misstep in my life, college, career, relationships, had a shadow. And now I could finally trace the shape. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was assembling. The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist. I told her everything, from the frosting on my binder to the possible paternity twist. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finally paused, she said, "I think you were raised in an ecosystem where love was traded for control." The words hit like truth I'd been craving. I nodded, voice shaky. "I think I'm grieving a version of my family that never really existed." "Good," she said. "That means you're not waiting for them to fix it." That night, I sat in the quiet, lit a candle, and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to say what had been festering for too long. "Dear Adelpha, you didn't destroy me. You exposed me to my own resilience." I signed it, folded it, and placed it in the same folder as the others. That evening, my phone buzzed. An anonymous number. One photo, Adelpha, at a clinic. The text beneath it, "Paternity test requested." I was drinking my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it might be Corliss checking in or a vendor following up on post-wedding payments. Instead, it was a message from my niece, the same one who'd sat quietly beside Adelpha at the graduation, whispering half-truths with guilt stitched into her voice. The message was a TikTok link. It opened to a shaky, behind-the-scenes video from the wedding. One of Adelpha's kids had been recording, probably by accident. The footage was grainy, but the audio, clear as crystal. Adelpha's voice. "Took half the wedding cash. Bet she'll never grow a spine." The background buzz of people chatting couldn't drown it out. There was laughter. Another voice, possibly her friend Janice, chuckled in response, saying, "She's too proud. She'll never say a word." I watched it 3 times, not with shock, with clarity. You didn't just betray me, Adelpha. You recorded your own downfall. I forwarded the clip to my own email, then saved it into the same folder I had created weeks ago. Record. I sat for a while at the kitchen table, the mug growing cold in my hand, heart calm. Not angry, not sad, focused. That afternoon, I called a local attorney. Not from a flashy billboard, not someone with "divorce specialist" in bold font, just a quiet office a few blocks from Corliss's workplace, recommended by one of his coworkers. The consultation was short. I explained the situation, the stolen money, the footage, the years of unpaid support, the defamation, the manipulation, the family smear campaigns. I showed the attorney the wedding box video, and now, the TikTok confession. He nodded as he scrolled, unbothered by the weight of what to me had been an emotional war zone. To him, it was paperwork. "This is more than morally wrong," he said plainly. "This is criminal misappropriation of funds, potentially theft, and depending on what else you can provide, grounds for a defamation case." I stared at the wall behind him, degrees framed, shelves neatly aligned, and let his words settle. "I'm not trying to burn bridges," I said. "I just want the land that was mine back. I want boundaries that can't be crossed." He nodded again. "Then let's send a letter. Nothing public yet, but enough to make it known, legally, you're not to be walked on." The letter would be delivered in 3 business days. On the walk home, I felt the cost of what I'd just done. Not in dollars. In the ache of turning my back on what I used to call loyalty. Family doesn't air laundry. Family forgives. That had been the gospel growing up, but it had never applied to me. I remembered all the moments I'd swallowed truth for the sake of unity. Thanksgiving dinners where I pretended not to hear backhanded comments, Birthdays where I clapped for others, but no one remembered mine. Times I lent money I knew I'd never see again. Silence was supposed to be strength, but all it had ever done was suffocate me. That night, I told Corliss everything, not because I needed permission, but because I knew I'd need a steady hand to hold if this spiral spun deeper. He listened, jaw clenched, but calm. "You're not being cruel," he said. "You're being honest. And finally, you're not carrying this alone." He kissed my forehead and added, "Accountability is not cruelty. Silence is." By the end of the week, word had spread. Not from me. Adelpha had, predictably, gotten ahead of it. A few family members messaged me in waves. "Seriously? You're suing her? Just let it go. You'll look bitter." But there were others. Quieter voices. Private messages. Phone calls late at night from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. One aunt sent me a card. Inside, it read, "Your silence was never your peace." I taped it to my bathroom mirror. Still, the role I was being cast in, the dramatic one, wasn't new. I had been here before. When I reported a teacher in high school for making inappropriate comments, I was told I misunderstood. Months later, 3 other students came forward. No one apologized to me. When I asked a previous boss not to yell at interns, I was labeled difficult. The intern later quit. Quietly. I never saw her again. Every time I had told the truth, I'd lost popularity. But I gained something else. Clarity. The letter arrived at Adelpha's doorstep 2 weeks later. It wasn't a lawsuit. Yet, it was a formal notice. A demand for reimbursement. An acknowledgement of damages. A cease and desist from speaking about me in any defamatory way, especially in front of minors. I didn't wait for her response. Instead, I walked into the florist shop and paid the final wedding invoice myself. The receipt now read, "Paid in full. B. Ramirez." Small, but symbolic. That afternoon, I cleaned out the last drawer in the house where Adelpha's items lingered. An old sweater, a half-used bottle of shampoo, a few birthday cards signed, "From the kids." I boxed them up, not to return, to reclaim space. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting my living room in that soft orange hue I used to love but forgot how to enjoy, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Adelpha's voice, clipped, sarcastic. "You really think this will make people love you more?" I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I just pressed save. Because I knew the hardest goodbye wasn't to her. It was to the version of me who kept waiting for her to change. The morning after the letter was delivered, I woke into a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind that usually comes with being alone, but a quiet that settled in my bones. A silence that didn't demand anything from me. No notifications lighting up my phone with family drama, no looming task, no fires to put out, just stillness. I brewed a cup of coffee and let it go cold on the table. I didn't care. I wasn't checking emails or balancing receipts or rewriting apologies in my head. I just sat. For once, I wasn't bracing for anything. There were messages on my phone, mostly from cousins, a few from aunts, none from Adelpha, and that said more than any reply ever could. Sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 apologies, or their absence. I went for a walk along the riverbank near my house, where I used to push the twins in a double stroller, 1 cup of apple slices between them. I remembered Lucy's tantrum over geese, and Chloe's poetry phase when she insisted on narrating every tree like it was a metaphor. I had carried so many versions of motherhood in my arms, and none of them had ever come with a nameplate or a frame on the wall. And still, I'd do it all again, just not like before. Back home, the stillness broke with a phone call. My mother. I answered. "You really had to take it that far?" Her voice was tight, not angry, just disappointed. That tone that always seemed more effective than yelling. I didn't flinch. "I didn't take it anywhere. I just stopped walking where you told me to." A pause, then a sigh, then the click of the line going dead. That wasn't rage, that was resignation. That conversation didn't explode, it simply ended, and it marked the end of an era, One where I bent until I disappeared. They never had to scream to silence me. All they needed was disappointment. Later that week, I returned to work. To the bakery and the late-night writing sessions. I noticed something strange. When I spoke, people listened. When I hesitated, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I had learned how to leave space for myself. I said no more often, without flinching, without explaining. Colleagues noticed. My boss even asked if I'd started therapy, which I had. "You seem more rooted," she said. That stuck with me. More rooted. I wasn't floating in guilt anymore. I wasn't spinning in obligation. I was here, present, grounded. I started a blog, anonymous at first, just a space for women who, like me, had been erased in the background of family portraits. I called it Still Here. The tagline read, "For the ones who were never thanked, but kept showing up anyway." One Thursday morning, a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Corliss was at work. The plumber wasn't due until Saturday. When I opened it, Chloe stood there. Alone. She looked older than I remembered, taller but more unsure. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Hey," I answered, surprised but not unwelcoming. "You okay?" She nodded, then hesitated. "I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" She blinked quickly, as if holding something back. "For everything. For raising me. For staying when Mom didn't." I held the door wider. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of tea warming our hands. "Mom always made it sound like you were the one causing problems," she admitted. "But I always knew you were the one who made sure I got to school, who bought my prom dress, who stayed up when I was sick." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "I guess I just wanted you to know," she added. "You were the constant." It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't repairing years of silence. But it was something. A generational crack in the cycle of pretending. That night, Corliss and I sat on the balcony. The sky was a quiet slate gray, no stars, just wind and our breathing. "I feel free," I told him. "But I also feel unmoored." He reached over, placed his hand over mine. "That's what happens when you stop carrying what wasn't yours." I laughed, short and soft. "I don't want to fix it anymore. I don't even want her back." "You don't need her back," he said. "You need yourself." I leaned into his shoulder, not because I was collapsing, but because I could. He didn't preach. He didn't offer a 5-step plan for healing. He just stayed. That was enough. Later that weekend, I pulled out a dusty cardboard box from the back of my closet. Inside, birthday cards from Adelpha, scribbled notes, a few gifts she gave me over the years, each one with a "sorry" attached like a bow. I sat with them, read each one, and then I cried. Not for the loss of her, but for the loss of the version of her I had waited for. The sister who might one day knock on my door and say, "I see you now." She wasn't coming. I burned the box in the fire pit behind the house. One note at a time. She didn't die, but the part of me that begged for her love did. The next morning, my laptop dinged with a new email. Subject: Writing Submission Invitation. "We've read your blog and would love to feature your writing in our next issue. Are you available for a quick call next week?" I read it twice. It turns out, when you stop chasing the wrong stage, the right spotlight finds you. The morning my blog post titled "The Cost of Being the Quiet Sister" went live, I wasn't expecting more than a few views from the support group I'd joined. Maybe a distant coworker, maybe a neighbor who saw the link on my page. But by the time I finished my second cup of coffee, the post had been shared over 200 times. By noon, it had taken on a life of its own. Family members I hadn't heard from in years were resharing the screenshots. Some praised it, some mocked it. A few even reshared Adelpha's old TikTok clip with the now circulating hashtag #SilentStrength. There were supportive messages, there were accusations, and somehow, through all of it, I felt steady. I didn't need to be understood by everyone, just by myself. 2 days later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox from the school district. Inside was a letter and a report. My address had been used to fraudulently enroll a student in a school outside her designated zone. The handwriting on the form was unmistakable. I didn't get angry. I scanned the paperwork and forwarded it to the board with a simple note. This address is no longer connected to that student or guardian. Later, I heard through the grapevine there was an administrative hearing. Adelpha showed up trying to defend her actions, but the curtain had started to tear. I didn't light the match. I just stopped shielding the flame. A week later, I was outside the corner cafe when she appeared. Makeup perfect, posture unshaken. She didn't even say hello. "Was it worth it?" she asked, the accusation loaded with years of entitlement. I met her eyes, unmoved. Yes, every second, because for once, I wasn't scared of being called bitter or cold or selfish. I was just honest. Her mouth tightened. "You think dragging our family through public mess makes you noble?" I pulled a folded paper from my purse, a copy of the attorney's letter and formal response to her defamation threat. "Try me," I said, and I walked away. Not fast, not flinching, just done. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Not everyone forgot, but fewer people brought it up. The story aged in their mouths, no longer a taste they could throw at me. Then came the email. An invitation to speak at a women's circle event. Small venue, local, raw. I said yes. The day of the event, I stood behind the podium and read part of my original blog post aloud. And in every room where I was asked to smile through insult, to make peace with distortion, I quietly asked myself, if I disappear so they feel comfortable, do I still exist? A woman in the back row cried. Afterward, she came up and hugged me. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor finally building, instead of patching. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that stops echoing someone else's lies. Another Saturday afternoon, a familiar knock came. My niece stood outside, shoulders smaller than before. "Mom's pretending nothing happened," she said. I nodded. "That's her story to rewrite, but you get to choose your truth." She looked down, hesitating. I handed her a journal, blank, but on the front it read, "Not the next her, the first you." That moment wasn't for Adelpha, it was for the next girl in line to not repeat the cycle, and in that, I found peace. That evening, I sat with Corliss on the porch. The sun had dipped low, casting shadows across our lawn. He reached for my hand. "It's quiet lately," he said. "In the best way," I replied. We didn't say much more, we didn't need to. Later that night, I opened an old storage bin. Inside were greeting cards, apology notes, small trinkets Adelpha had left over the years, each one a bandage on a wound she never stopped reopening. I sifted through them, one by one, letting the memory run its course. Some I smiled at, most I didn't. Then I carried the box out back and lit a match. The flames rose slow, then full. Paper curling, edges blackening, smoke carrying pieces I no longer needed. She didn't die, but the part of me that begged for her love did. Months passed. The house stayed peaceful. My phone no longer buzzed with family chaos. My mailbox no longer held invisible tasks disguised as guilt. One morning, walking past a bookstore, I caught sight of a familiar title in the display window, an anthology of women's stories. There, on the back cover, was my name. I stepped inside, ran my fingers across the glossy print. Bellamy Ramirez, author of The Cost of Being the Quiet Sister. I didn't cry. I smiled. Funny thing about being erased for so long. Once you write yourself back in, you don't need their ink anymore.